Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, HR Questions Often Asked Too Late. My name is Mark Stewart, and I'll be your host for today's session. We'll be getting started in just a couple of minutes, so sit tight while we let everybody else join. All right. Before we get into today's content, we would love to hear from you. So you should see a poll on your screen now. We've put together a few quick questions to give us some insight into where your business sits when it comes to people management and workplace compliance. There's no right or wrong answers here. This is just to help us tailor the session and make sure we're covering what matters most to you. So just take a moment to fill that in and we'll share the results at the end of the session. So we'll give you about a minute to go through those now. All right. I think we can crack into it. My name's Mark Stewart, and I'm a business development manager here at Citation Group. Welcome to today's webinar on HR questions often asked too late. Before we start, just a couple of housekeeping items. Firstly, if you have any questions at all throughout the session, you're able to use the QA feature at the bottom of your screen. You don't need to ask it in the chat. There's an actual feature for that. Don't wait until the end to submit those questions. You can just drop them in as they come to you. We'll be answering your questions at the end of the session, or as many of them as we can, time permitting. Yes, the session is being recorded, and we'll be sending a recording link to everybody after the session so you can revisit anything you like. We've got quite a few people joining us today, which is always good to see. If you've heard anything about Citation Group, you've likely heard about our 24/7 advice line. It's one of the services we're best known for. It's really there to help employers navigate workplace issues as they arise and ideally before they become larger problems. So, given the strong attendance today, I'm guessing many of you are here because you want to get ahead of any situations that could potentially turn into a HR crisis. We're really glad that you've joined us today, and by the time you finish, you'll have a clearer picture of costly HR mistakes that can catch businesses off guard when they don't have something like an advisory solution in place. I'm also delighted to introduce today's guest speaker, Florence Pierre, who's our technical manager here at Citation Group. Florence brings specialist expertise across human resources, health and safety, and employment relations with a strong focus on ER. With a Bachelor of Behavioral Studies and a Master of Human Resource Management, she combines technical knowledge with a genuine understanding of people. Florence is passionate about supporting businesses through complex workplace challenges and helping them build strong, compliant, and high performing practices. I'll also be back at the end of the session to share the poll results from the beginning, and I'll be telling you about an exclusive offer today as well. Now, before we hand over, just a quick word about us at Citation Group. We've been supporting Australian businesses for over 30 years now across HR, workplace health and safety, quality assurance, legal compliance, and also payroll and workforce management now through Found You. We work with thousands of businesses across the country, from small teams through to large enterprises. We're really there just to help you guys stay compliant, manage risk, and build better workplaces. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, feel free to reach out after today's session. And today we'll be featuring Citation HR. So, a lot of the topics we talk about today are the things that we regularly help businesses with every day. Citation HR provides ongoing HR advice and workplace relations support. So, rather than, I guess, trying to figure these things out yourselves when an issue pops up, you've got a team of experts that you can call on for guidance. So we help with everything from contracts and policies through to performance issues, terminations, award interpretations, and just general employee matters, with the goal of helping your business make confident decisions before a small issue becomes a larger one. So if you'd like to learn anything more about Citation HR and how we can help support your business, we'll share some details towards the end of the session. So that's going to be about it from me for now. Like I said, you'll be hearing from me a little bit later on to go through the poll results and some questions that will be raised, no doubt, during the Q&A using the Q&A function. So for now, I'd like to hand over to Florence, who's going to take us through today's topic. Over to you, Florence.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Thanks for the introduction. And look, I'm really pleased to be with you all today to discuss such an important topic. Today's session is going to explore why HR issues escalate unnecessarily, the behavioural patterns behind delayed action, the real risks businesses face, and how early HR advice support really does change outcomes. So we're going to talk through some real case studies from Citation HR today, and this is to illustrate the consequences of delay and the benefits of proactive HR management. Okay, so up on the screen, you can see some of the reasons why businesses do delay HR action. And look, most organisations don't delay because they don't care. It's really for a variety of other reasons. So one of those reasons might be avoidance of conflict. And simply managers just hope issues will sort themselves out rather than initiating uncomfortable conversations. Optimism bias is another reason, and that really is about leaders assuming that employees will improve over time without intervention. And that's a fairly common scenario where you assume that maybe they're going through some teething issues, maybe there's some situations that are, triggering a lack of performance, etc., and you just simply think that things will improve without intervention. Fear of getting the process wrong. From my experience, I would say this is one of the most common reasons that managers don't apply HR intervention early. You know that there are legal risks involved, and so it feels safer to simply do nothing. But ironically, that actually can increase your legal risk. And then workload pressure. Managers, professionals are all very busy. And it can feel tempting to deprioritize people issues and just simply not deal with them. But again, that is a risk to you. And then we've got personal discomfort, and that often simply comes down to leaders just not being trained in performance and contact management. And so it just feels a little bit too hard. And that's a key reason why managers may avoid it. The issue is if early warning signs do go unaddressed, small issues become expensive ones. And that's why we're here today. And when we talk about expense, we're not just talking about money, but also your time. All right, so you will see there some of the questions that we hear at Citation. You can read through them. I'll call out some of them. We've got here, I misclassified an employee under the award when she first started. What can we do now? My employee's been underperforming for months. Can I terminate them today? We want to restructure, but haven't consulted. Is that a problem? My employee's been absent for months due to illness. What can I do? So that's a sample of questions that we will commonly receive. Often we're seeing managers waiting until the situation is urgent, it's become risky, and often it's quite emotionally charged by that point. So by the time they call HR, we find that there's documentation missing, processes simply haven't been followed, and legal exposure has already formed. Okay, so Citation HR Service can assist you in dealing with these scenarios before you have legal issues on your hands, because delays in dealing with HR issues do create measurable as well as hidden costs. And I'm just going to take a little bit of time now to outline some of those risks before we move into how we can mitigate them. So legal exposure, you're probably familiar with unfair dismissal claims, general protections, discrimination and wage theft penalties. They're a sample of legal risks that you can face. Management time. So when we look at this, we think about issues that can actually be solved in one conversation, but they've now escalated and can result in weeks or months of additional process. With regards to recruitment, we're looking at delayed action, often leading to turnover at the worst possible time. So you haven't planned, you haven't expected it, and there are hidden costs involved there. Reputational damage, this one can often be an underrated cost, but I think it's a really important one to think about, because poorly handled exits or employee issues, they do often affect employer brand as well as internal trust. So that can't be underestimated. And finally, up on the screen, you'll see psychosocial hazards. So under work health and safety laws, failing to address conflict, poor behaviour or performance issues can create a psychosocial risk, and employers must act early to prevent them. Okay, so what we're going to do today, we're actually going to go through a number of case studies. Again, these are the sorts of things that come through Citation HR. In fact, these are real examples. So each case study will highlight a different type of HR issue that escalated due to delayed action and how HR advisory support resolved it in the end. But in all these circumstances, dealing with the issue earlier would have been easier and less risky for the employer. All right, so case study 1, inappropriate behaviour at a work function. Okay, so I'm going to talk through the calls. So Sarah from a retail company calls Citation HR and says they had a staff event the previous night. One of their team members behaved inappropriately and they want to know what their obligations are. So Citation HR consultant asked Sarah some questions to get some background on the situation. He learns that the employee, Emily, is a junior analyst and has been employed for 10 months. 2 people have complained that at the company-sponsored networking event, Emily became intoxicated and made inappropriate comments to a senior manager. Several employees witnessed the behaviour and reported feeling uncomfortable. So the consultant talks to Sarah about the risks involved in this matter before providing advice for how the company can handle the situation in a way that mitigates these risks. So there's here a sexual harassment claim risk, and this risk is going to be increased if the behaviour is not addressed promptly. Vicarious liability because the event was work-related. Again, we look at reputational damage. If staff lose trust in leadership's willingness to act in circumstances such as these, it does have an impact on culture and reporting. And then we have our safety risks, and that's associated with alcohol at work functions. So based on the risks identified, the consultant recommends to the employer that they begin a fact-finding process immediately, speaking to the complainants initially to get further information about what they observed. Then invite Emily to a formal meeting to discuss the allegations and receive her responses, ensuring procedural fairness. They may speak to witnesses, and then assess whether the conduct breached the company's code of conduct or any other workplace policies or even legislation. Then it's up to the employer to consider appropriate outcomes. And it's important that the employer hasn't commenced the process with a predetermined outcome. The appropriate and proportionate outcome will, in fact, depend on what comes out of the investigation. It may include a warning, mandatory training, or other corrective action. And again, that can't be determined from the beginning of the process. And then the advice was to review the company's work function alcohol management procedures to mitigate future risks. So Sarah did take the consultant's advice and commenced an investigation. The investigation confirmed that behaviour occurred. Emily received a written warning and was required to complete respectful behaviour training. The business went ahead and updated its events management policy to include drinking limits and designated responsible managers. And staff did report feeling reassured by the transparent and swift handling of the issue. So that was a really positive outcome there. Okay. So now we're looking at something quite different here. This is annualised salary not covering award entitlements. So I'm hoping that some of these case studies, if not all, will really resonate with you and the types of issues that you're facing in your workplace. So in this particular case, operations manager Jess calls Citation HR because an employer claims his salary does not cover the overtime and weekend penalties he regularly works. The consultant learns that Alex is a full-time support worker, paid an annual salary intended to absorb all award entitlements under the SHADS award. Alex regularly works weekend shifts and extended days that exceed his rostered hours. Jess admits that none of Alex's hours are tracked and there is no written individual flexibility agreement outlining which award entitlements the salary is meant to cover. When Alex raised the issue with his manager, he was told, "Your salary covers everything." He then lodged a formal complaint. So the consultant on the call outlines the risks to Jess. There's a risk of breach of the award, which is strict rules around individual flexibility agreements and record keeping. Significant underpayment liability for overtime and weekend penalties. Potential Fair Work Ombudsman investigation and penalties. High likelihood of similar claims from other salaried support workers. And reputational damage in a sector already under scrutiny for compliance matters. So based on these specific risks to the organisation, the consultant recommends acknowledging Alex's complaint in writing and confirming an investigation is underway, conducting a full reconciliation of Alex's actual hours and shift types against award entitlements, paying any underpayments promptly, including penalties and allowances, and implementing compliant individual flexibility agreements that specify how the terms of the award are varied, including arrangements for when work is performed and inclusion of penalty rates and allowances, and ensuring that the employee is better off overall at the time the agreement is made. It's also recommended that the employer introduces accurate time tracking for all salaried employees, including but not limited to recording broken shifts, sleepovers and travel time as applicable to their award, and reviewing all salaried employees to ensure systemic compliance. So Jess confirmed that Alex was owed a substantial back payment once his hours and allowances were reconciled. The business processed the payment within 2 weeks and they implemented a new individual flexibility agreement procedure aligned with the SHADS award requirements, introducing time tracking for all support workers and avoided escalation to the Fair Work Ombudsman. Okay, so case study 3, early termination within probation. Okay, so Melissa's from a medical clinic company she calls Citation HR and says that one of their medical receptionists is coming up to 6 months. She's not a good fit and has been a bit difficult. Melissa wants to terminate her before she hits the minimum employment period. She asks if she can do that. The consultant from Citation HR asks for more information and finds out that their medical receptionist, Tara, has been employed for 5 months and 2 weeks. He also becomes aware that over the past 2 months, Tara has lodged a written complaint about excessive workload, requested flexible working arrangements due to a newly diagnosed chronic health condition, and taken several days of personal leave supported by medical certificates. However, Melissa describes Tara as not fitting in and also as being too demanding. There is no documented performance management, no warnings, and no behavioural issues on record. The manager wants to terminate Tara before she reaches 6 months, believing this avoids unfair dismissal risk. However, as the consultant outlines, the timing coincides directly with Tara exercising multiple workplace rights, including making a complaint about her employment, taking personal leave, which is a workplace entitlement, and requesting flexible work arrangements due to her health. So the consultant explains to Melissa that this creates a high-risk general protection scenario. Even though Tara is still within the minimum employment period of 6 months, so unfair dismissal doesn't apply, as the employer was aware, the business faces significant legal exposure still. So Tara could argue she was dismissed because she exercised workplace rights. These claims carry, in terms of our general protections claims, they carry uncapped compensation, civil penalties, and reverse the burden of proof. There's also a discrimination risk. Because Tara disclosed a chronic health condition, termination could be perceived as discriminatory. And retaliation perception. So terminating shortly after complaints or leave requests strongly suggests a prohibited reason for termination and could be considered retaliation by the employer. And then we come back to reputational and cultural damage. Staff may perceive the business is punishing employees for speaking up, which creates reputational and cultural damage. And of course, there's regulator involvement as a risk. The Fair Work Ombudsman may investigate if the dismissal appears linked to complaints or illness. So based on this high-risk scenario, the consultant recommends a cautious, structured approach that includes consideration of not proceeding with termination at this time because of the proximity between Tara's complaint, leave, and flexible work request, and the fact that that creates a strong inference of adverse action. It's also recommended that the employer document the legitimate, non-prohibited reasons for concern. If there are genuine performance or behavioural issues, they must be specific, factual, documented, and unrelated to her complaints or health condition. So Melissa was advised to begin a fair and supportive performance management process. This includes a formal meeting, clear examples of performance concerns, setting reasonable expectations, a time frame for improvement, and ensuring there are written records. And of course, avoiding referencing Tara's complaints, health condition, or leave, as these cannot form part of the decision-making process. And it's up to the employer to consider whether they actually allow the minimum employment period to pass if necessary. You will note that Tara has disclosed a health condition. So Melissa was also given advice on how to manage this aspect with Tara. We won't go into depth in how that aspect was managed in this particular scenario, and that's because we're going to be looking at something quite similar in another case study, and that's going to work through that process in more detail. So ultimately, the outcome for this particular case, the employer did follow the advice and made the decision not to terminate Tara within the minimum employment period. Support was offered to Tara in relation to her disclosed health concerns. A formal performance meeting was held, during which Tara acknowledged some challenges and requested additional training. A structured performance improvement plan was implemented. So over the next 6 weeks, Tara's performance improved significantly. Her flexible work arrangements was approved and her relationship with the team stabilised. So the business avoided a high-risk general protections claim and strengthened its internal processes for handling complaints, flexible work requests, and performance concerns which present during probation. Another very positive outcome. So we move to case study 4, and this is regarding a non-work cover health-related absence. Supervisor Tammy calls Citation HR and advises that one of their employees has been off sick on and off for months. It's not a workplace injury. She wants to know how to manage the situation. So after seeking more information from Tammy, the consultant finds out that the employee, Aisha, is a retail assistant and has been employed on a part-time basis for 18 months. Aisha has previously disclosed she has a chronic autoimmune condition causing intermittent flare-ups. She has taken 17 days of personal leave over 4 months. Her certificates are valid, but the absences are impacting rostering and team workload. The consultant explains to Tammy what the risks are with this situation before discussing the process to take to mitigate them. There is a discrimination risk if the employer mishandles a health condition. An adverse action claim if the employment relationship is affected because of illness. Operational strain due to unpredictable absences, and this is exactly why the employer was calling. And then we've got psychological harm if the employee feels unsupported. So the consultant recommends the following to Tammy. Hold a wellbeing and capacity meeting to understand Aisha's limitations and to discuss reasonable adjustments. Request additional medical information about her capacity to work and explore adjustments such as modified duties, predictable shifts, or reduced hours. But of course, it would all be dependent on what the medical advice was as to what those modifications should be. And document all discussions and decisions. And that's to mitigate any other sort of adverse action risks that can arise. Only consider termination on medical grounds if Aisha is unable to meet the inherent requirements of her role, long-term incapacity is confirmed, and all reasonable adjustments have been exhausted. And then a show cause process would need to occur before termination, and the consultant would certainly assist the employer with that process if it was required down the track. So luckily here it wasn't required. Aisha's doctor recommended consistent morning shifts and reduced lifting duties. The employer implemented those adjustments and Aisha's attendance stabilised. The business avoided legal risk and retained a valuable employee. Okay, so our final case study, another change of pace. We're now looking at genuine redundancy. In this situation, there was one employee who had been underperforming, and the employer wanted to know what to do about this situation. So owner Ross calls Citation HR and says that they have 3 marketing coordinators doing the same role. One of them has been underperforming for months. But now the company also genuinely needs to reduce the team from 3 to 2. Ross wants to know how to handle this without getting into trouble. So in this case, Ross is already aware of some of the risks and he's looking to get some advice on how to mitigate them. The consultant seeks to understand the company's business case for the restructure and learns that the business has experienced a significant downturn in project volume. After a review, leadership determined that only 2 coordinator roles are required going forward. The consultant seeks to understand the situation with the underperforming employee and is told that one of the marketing coordinators, Marie, has been underperforming for 9 months, missing deadlines, producing incomplete work, and requiring frequent correction. However, the manager never documented these concerns or commenced a formal performance improvement process. The manager wants to make Marie redundant because of these performance issues, but is now concerned that selecting Marie for redundancy may appear unfair or unlawful, even though the business genuinely needs to reduce headcount. So in this case, the consultant does agree with Ross that there are some risks involved which can be overcome by following the correct process. The risks in this situation, as you can see up on your screen there, is unfair dismissal risk if redundancy is used to remove an underperforming employee without a fair selection process. The redundancy being deemed not genuine if the employer cannot justify why Marie was selected. Adverse action or discrimination claims if the employee argues she was targeted for reasons unrelated to the restructure and you don't have evidence to mitigate that. Legal exposure if selection criteria are subjective or undocumented. And cultural damage if staff perceive redundancy as a tool to avoid performance management. So based on these risks, the consultant explains that the employer must separate the performance issue from the structural change and follow a defensible redundancy process. And so we're going to go through the different steps of that process now. One is to confirm the redundancy is genuine. So document the operational reasons for reducing the team from 3 to 2. It's advisable that this is completed prior to any change process starting. Identify the selection pool. So in this scenario, all 3 coordinators must be included because they perform the same role. Develop objective, measurable selection criteria and apply them consistently. The consultant emphasises with this employer that undocumented performance concerns cannot be heavily relied upon. And then it's up to the employer to begin a formal consultation process. And as part of that consultation process, each employee must be informed of the proposed restructure, the reason for it, the selection criteria they will be assessed against, the opportunity to provide feedback on the change, and the fact that no final decision has been made at this stage. It's important to also remember to check for any suitable alternative roles before confirming redundancy, as there may be redeployment opportunities within your business or related entities. And make a final decision based on evidence. So if Marie legitimately scores lowest on objective criteria, the redundancy is defensible. Address the performance, if we could just go up again, please. Address the performance issue separately. If Marie is not selected for redundancy, it is recommended to the employer that they begin a formal performance management process. The consultant also outlines that Ross should refer to any applicable modern award or enterprise agreement to understand if additional requirements exist for the employer undertaking major change. Okay, so Ross does follow the structured process outlined by the consultant. And in doing so, objective criteria were created and applied to all 3 coordinators. Marie scored lower in documented accuracy, versatility, and qualifications. The scoring was not based on undocumented performance concerns. Consultation was conducted with all 3 employees, and unfortunately, no redeployment options were available in this case. So in the end, Marie was selected for redundancy based on transparent, objective, and defensible criteria. She accepted the redundancy outcome and she didn't challenge the decision. The business completed the restructure without legal issues and implemented a new policy requiring managers to document performance concerns promptly to avoid similar risks in the future. Okay, so I hope that that's given you a taste of the breadth of concerns that can come through to Citation HR, and I wouldn't be surprised if you're familiar with one or all of those scenarios in your own business. So when businesses contact Citation HR early, the benefits are that issues are addressed before they escalate. Documentation is created from the start. Payroll errors are corrected before they become wage theft risks. Restructures follow a compliant process. Managers gain confidence and capability. And employees experience clearer expectations and fairer treatment. So proactive HR intervention results in risk prevention rather than you engaging in reactionary exercises. As we said at the beginning, reactionary exercises are costly in a number of ways, no less your time. So I just encourage you all to call HR early, even if you're unsure, if you just want to get confirmation of next steps, that's okay, because I can tell you that early conversations prevent 90% of the issues that we've explored today. So thank you very much.
All right, Florence, thank you so much. As always, fantastic discussion points there. Lots of practical takeaways, hopefully, for everybody. Before we finish up and get into your questions, I actually just wanted to take a quick look back at the poll that we ran at the start of the session. So, to those of you that weren't able to join bang on 11, we ran a brief poll at the beginning, and we're just going to go through some of those results now. So 53% of businesses that joined us today only find out about HR issues once employees raise them informally, by which point it's often already too late. Nearly a third of you said that restructures and redundancies pose the biggest financial risk, closely followed by unfair dismissal claims at 31%. Over a third of today's attendees have delayed dealing with an employee issue because they weren't sure of the right process. This is one that we hear all the time. And as Florence just mentioned, that delay is exactly where risk starts to build up and potentially snowball. And just 32% of today's attendees said that they've never delayed acting on an employee issue. So basically, 68% have hesitated at least once. Again, this is just going back to those delays and potentially snowballing once again. So look, there are some really interesting findings there, some of them not so surprising. We do ask some questions similar to this in other discussions we have. These are the types of matters that our team deals with on a daily basis, and it's something we'd actually be really keen to help you with now. So with that in mind, I'd like to take you through today's offer. So as a thank you for attending today's webinar, we're pleased to offer an exclusive attendee-only promotion, which is a complimentary psychosocial risk assessment. And we're offering our 3-year term through Citation HR. We're offering the 3-year term on 5-year pricing. Right. So to claim this offer, just simply keep an eye out for the follow-up email you'll receive later today. There'll be a claim offer button on that email. Send through your details and someone from the Citation HR team will reach out to you. This offer is available just for webinar attendees. And like I said, someone will reach out and we can take you through how all of that works. And then finally, your questions answered. Again, as per usual, that QA function got pretty heavy usage. So we're not going to be able to answer every question. So for those of you that did ask a question using the QA function, if I don't or if we don't cover it now, someone can reach out and go through it with you post this session as well. So Florence, I'll get you to weigh in on a few of these as well, please. The first one here, for case study 4,
Mhm.
what medical information can you request and what would that process look like?
Yeah, really good question. So you can request medical information that's reasonably necessary to support a lawful workplace purpose. So in this case, it's medical information that speaks to whether the employee can meet the inherent requirements of their role. It's not a broad stroke gathering of information about someone's sort of personal medical history. So it's used for the purpose of confirming fitness for work, understanding any restrictions or adjustments that you'll need to be mindful of with that particular employee. And of course, just managing your health and safety risks, as that's an obligation for you as an employer. And then, when we're looking at workers' comp, that's a different scenario to the one we presented today, but that's a whole other area where you might seek different medical information. How you do that would look a little bit different.
Great. Okay. Question three. This is one that I can actually answer as well. Do you have performance management documentation templates available on your cloud-based system? Yes, we do. We've actually got workflows or checklists on the platform as well to take you through step by step more of the administrative side of things, the documenting things, and then you've also got our advisory team to have those discussions with you on, okay, should this person be on some form of performance management? There's all sorts of variables that we'd like to discuss with you before kicking that off. So absolutely, we've got templates upon templates on there for all
Mhm.
sorts of things. So we can tick that one off. Next question, what is your best tip or tips to get management on board with documenting discussions like performance concerns, behavior concerns, and anything else similar to that?
Yeah, very good question. To get people on board, I think it's generally through experiencing some of the scenarios we've had today where you get to the almost what should be the end of a process and you realize that you're at a bit of a standstill because you haven't got the required documentation in advance. And so after a while, managers will realize that they're in these sticky situations a bit more often than they like. And if they're shown, if they're at the beginning, if you document, if you have clear conversations, if you have clear correspondence, we could move a lot faster. And I think generally, just seeing that play out is of assistance. It may be that when an employee or a manager comes to you wanting to work through a particular employee issue, that as par for the course, you ask them to provide you with their documentation so that you can fully understand the scenario and provide advice. If they don't have that, it's a good opportunity then to remind them of the importance of it, to have a much lower risk and a more swift process to deal with their issue that they're facing.
Awesome. And there's still questions coming through, by the way. We've still got a couple more that we can get through. We've got time for a few more. This one I find interesting as well. If an employer is found not guilty, is there compensation or something available for that employer? Say, and the question asked was around a smaller business of under 30 employees.
Okay, that's probably a fairly broad question. Look, it's not necessarily compensation. I mean, if an employee makes a claim, if that's what you're referring to, I'm not quite sure if that's what you're
Mm,
referring to. If they're making a legal claim and it's found that your company has behaved appropriately, it would be that there is not necessarily any compensation that you need to give to the employee. But generally speaking, it's not a reverse of that.
yeah,
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay. And this one relates to the first case study, the one they've put here with the outcomes being staff reassured. What does
Mhm.
that look like when keeping the matter confidential?
Yeah, so that's more in reference to those who are involved. So, as the case study mentioned, there are a number of witnesses that felt uncomfortable and there were complainants. So, those particular individuals will know that the matter is being handled because the likelihood is you've had meetings with those people. So, as part of that fact checking process, as part of those witness interviews, people do feel very validated in those moments when they're feeling heard, that their complaints are being taken seriously, and even observers that their story and what they have seen is being taken seriously. And that's very reassuring for people. I mean, in terms of the confidentiality piece, the expectation would be that no one outside that small group is aware of the issue. Confidentiality is one of those things that can be at times quite hard to manage. But look, in this scenario, if we go back to the point here, it is that it demonstrates that your company is taking a stand against inappropriate behaviours and being proactive, which is a really positive outcome for everybody.
Great. And the last question that we've got time for, do you only provide verbal advice? through Citation HR?
No, we don't. We provide more than that. So you've got tailored verbal advice. You've also got scripts and letter templates that we can provide for you. We can certainly work through any contracts that you might need us to review. And again, against awards that might be applicable, etc. So, in addition to that, we can provide you with follow-up advice in email just to ensure that everything's captured from the conversation you've had. So, no, it's far more than verbal advice.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, well, we're pretty much finishing up bang on time. We'll move on to the last slide now. It's, yeah, all the time we have for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and a massive thank you, Florence. Again, another really valuable session. As I mentioned, we'll be sending the recording link out to everyone, so keep an eye on your inbox. While you're there, be sure to look out for your exclusive attendee offer, which will be included in that email as well. If you've got any further questions or you want to chat to us about how we can help, please don't hesitate to get in touch. We'll reach out to those of you who we weren't able to answer your questions as well. Thank you again, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you.